everyone. Welcome to Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours.
Hello again. Sorry about that. We are, of course, doing what we can to make sure we get in touch with you and that we do these office hours. But you know, Wi-Fi and me, somehow I end up.
we have good luck with the internet in here sometimes, and sometimes we have the worst.
Yeah,
luck.
it's not it's.
It depends.
Yes. And I thank you for bearing with us, because I do think it's important enough that we'll keep on trying and make sure that we get in touch in any way that we can.
Commissioner, you had a really crazy week this week.
Yeah, it went really fast.
Every week.
I know. It feels like the weeks are flying by, which, you know, I think there are, like, for everybody out there who's busy, there are great days. There are days that I feel like, you know, today was a very introspective day, and there are days where I'm like, yay, we got a lot done. And this week held all of those things. So yeah, it was good. What about
Oh my goodness. You know, I feel like, first of all, things are getting to a place where things are slowing down a little bit, and constituents are coming in, emailing us, and we're getting cases done. I feel very comfortable working hand in hand with the community.
Yeah, we are.
It's so great.
We are so. I think, well, I will always say that I'm just like the luckiest of all the commissioners for having the type of community we have that stays so plugged in and stays so communicative, and has the people that get in touch with us oftentimes have a bigger vision. So I love that it's not just about them. You know, thinking about some of our meetings this week that we had, that it was about their whole community or their whole area, or about something even bigger, the whole planet, which I love.
Which I love that. And so, yeah, I'm Lee Perry. You got a lot of new followers this week.
Welcome.
And so for those of you who are watching and this is your first time, please know that you can leave questions and comments or concerns in the chat, in the comment box, but also you can email district1@ocfl.net, and I answer that, and I work hand in hand with you, and we loop in the commissioner on major issues.
And I actually really want to reinforce that, and in addition to it, let people know that sometimes if there's a question that comes up in a posting on social media, what we want to do is make sure that if we can get you coming through the office, that we can really get more done, because we can engage all of our staff or any other departments where there's connections that can be made and real quantitative answers that we can fulfill. So I think sometimes we'll give a generic or kind of a overview answer on a question on social media, and then say, hey, please contact the office. That's not because we're trying to put anyone off. It's because we want you in. And the way that we get you in is we get you in on those official communications. Social media is awesome because it's really sort of our bulletin board. It's our it's our way of having a conversation. But really, if we want to get stuff done, we want to make sure that we're getting you in our official lines of communication, which is the easiest way to do it is by email.
Yes, and so funneling all these concerns and questions, the XYZ, into that system, behind the scenes, I track all the correspondence, so we can kind of keep each person's case separate, and so that you just understand why we do that.
Yeah, and we have a timeline, and we're able to really articulate what the need is. So yeah, it's very, very helpful to get it that way. I just want people to understand that it's not, there is, you know, the intention is to make sure that we're being as thorough as we can be. And
I try to answer every email. So if you don't hear from me, reply. I will definitely get back to you. And district1@ocfl.net. So yeah, let's talk about this week. The COVID rates are slowly getting smaller.
So I love the visual that if you've seen some of the postings coming out of my office, Orange County. So you've probably heard by now of herd immunity, something that I hadn't heard of until the pandemic, but it's the idea of enough of us being immune to coronavirus that we are, as a society, safe enough to really resume all interaction. And there's a certain number that scientists have identified that if we get to 79%, that if we get to that number, that we are sort of, you know, out of the woods and able to be as interactive as we want to be, and sort of allow, you know, our immunities to go back on that regular, you know, regular systems. Where we are right now is 76% of 65 and up are vaccinated in Orange County, which is pretty darn close to that 79%. But we have a long way to go with our under 65 crowd. So if you're tuning into this and you are in the under 65 crowd and you know who you are, my younger friends, it's time. We are now vaccinating 18 and up. We can even 16 and up vaccinate along with parental consent. The Pfizer vaccine has been approved under the emergency approval for 16 and up. And we have mobile vaccine drive-through sites all around the county. OCFL.net if you want to see some of the specific locations. The convention center has the appointment site still operating, but the county is really trying to pivot to doing some remote sites, sites away from the convention center, because it's not close to everyone. And we want to make sure that there's accessibility for everybody, and that we're getting into the communities, not just waiting for the communities to get into the convention center.
Yeah, and you might not know necessarily what location is close to you. So we have our research aide and Bulmer dropping some links in the comments for you, and you can always email us if you are questioning what's in your area. For my friends that are in that 16 to 40 age group, I see a lot of my friends posting videos of dancing in the club even way before the vaccinations were as widely accessible as they are now. You are not immune.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with dancing in the club, but just get your shot first.
Please get your
then,
shot.
Maybe give it a couple weeks to really start kicking in. Our office, we're all vaccinated. We're all feeling great. I had like maybe a 5-minute soreness, and then I felt fabulous.
Yeah.
So I think that just know that right now, I think some of the rumors that are filtering around are that these vaccines didn't have enough research behind them. Well, I'm here to tell you that understanding how many people have already been vaccinated around the world gives us what would have looked like the trials in any other rollout of a pharmaceutical. It's just very different this time because it did get the emergency authorization. But as every day that goes by, as we see the safety and efficacy of these vaccines, it is more and more evident that there isn't a reason not to. So unless you have an allergy or your physician tells you for some specific reason to not get vaccinated, everybody needs to be vaccinated, and we can really recover as a country, as a world. It's our only way back. And I think if I haven't already mentioned it, but stop me if I have, another place that the county is partnering with are the Bravo supermarkets, because I know that sometimes they're located in communities where we are able to get in to areas that people may not be able to get out to some of those vaccine sites. So the one that today was open, let's see, Oak Ridge Road. Yep, that's actually going to be also next. Yes, I'm sorry, Oak Ridge Road. And that's going to be also on Monday. Barber Park will be Monday, April 12th through Friday, April 16th. And that is another drive-through mobile vaccine site. So OCFL.net, if you want to see all those addresses and you can, see what's closest to you, or remind a family member, friend, coworker of what may be closest to them, coming to them.
Yeah, and then we can go dance in the club.
That's right. And then we can go dance in the clubs, exactly.
Awesome. Some other updates. So yesterday,
yes,
you had engaged the Horizon West community to please make their voices heard on
library.
The library.
Yes. So I love a library. I love books. I consider books my friends, and understanding when I first came into office that Horizon West was the next branch to be built in Orange County through the Orange County Library System, I was really excited to share that with the community.
Yeah.
And just to kind of back up and explain the structure, Orange County Library System is its own independent entity. It's not us. So they have a board of trustees that makes decisions about how to fund projects, where projects are located, what events will be coming, and they have a wealth of information and a wealth of services. I love our library system, and I feel very grateful to the work of all the people who are involved. And I want to say that the Horizon West branch was something that was studied. There was data collected about population growth. There were various locations that were vetted. And then the Board of Trustees voted to go forward with the Horizon West branch as the next, I think, obvious branch because of the population growth and because of the availability of a piece of property. Right now, there's ongoing information coming in from the city of Orlando about the need that they have for an area that is also growing very fast. I do not want anyone to misinterpret my words and think that I'm saying that there's any area that should go without a library branch. I think everyone should have access to a library. It's really important. I think what I want people to know is that if an independent board like the Orange County Library System Board votes to approve the funding of a branch based on data and facts, that process should go unimpeded and that they should be able to go forward with that project without being delayed or obstructed. And there were some issues that arose in what felt like a alternate project. And we were told that it would not be discussed on this week's Orlando Library Board meeting. And so we, of course, communicated everything with our Horizon West friends. We really encouraged our Horizon West residents to stay engaged, to send emails and make phone calls and to do public comment, just really thanking the Board of Trustees for prioritizing Horizon West and for going forward with that branch. And they did. We had so much great interaction with the community. Horizon West, as always, is so plugged in, and the residents were so engaged. And a resident started a petition to let them know this, this should go forward. We really want this here. We have a need for it in Horizon West. And then we received some communication that it wouldn't be on this week's agenda.
In writing.
And so I kept an obligation for another meeting at a different community. And there was discussion at that meeting about the project. So I was a little disappointed that I was told one thing and that another thing happened during the meeting. I was, though, ultimately really grateful that we had representation there from District 1. Horizon West resident Cynthia was there, and I know that spoke. I believe there were several other residents that spoke. And there are going to be more of these meetings. We're going to continue to ask you to come and speak. It's really as little or as much as you want to say within the time frame they give you. My advice would be just to thank them and say, Library Board of Trustees, thank you so much for making a decision that's going to benefit Horizon West and for moving forward with the Horizon West branch. We can't wait for it to get here. We're all really excited about it. That is a good message, and it's not something that's there's nothing controversial about it, and you're not being antagonistic. It really isn't an us versus them. It's just thanking them and encouraging them to keep moving forward with the plans that were already decided on.
Yeah. And for those of you who want to make your voice heard, definitely feel free to reach out to district1@ocfl.net. We archive and are keeping track of all of the people who are reaching out.
Well, I want them actually to go straight to the Orlando board. I want you to go straight to the library people, and that's because it's not part of Orange County's. So I love hearing from you about it, and we can certainly, I want to continue to talk about it. But if you have a note that you want to send the Board of Trustees to let them know, thank you for going forward with the Horizon West branch. We can't wait for it. We've heard about it. We're excited about it. Send it straight to Orlando Library, the Orange County Library System Board of Trustees, the board director, and even the CFO. You can include all those people on that communication. They have their own email address, and I believe Anne will be putting it in the conversation so that you can email them directly. And like I said, we'll just make sure that we continue to keep engaged and make sure they know that we are eagerly awaiting that project.
Yeah, and definitely add us to the email too, so that we can keep track of your email and keep you, in the newsletter with updates and make sure that you're made aware too. May 13th at 6 p.m. is currently when the next board meeting is supposed to be. If there's any changes to that, I want to make sure that I have your information.
And I'll be at that one, no matter what they tell us is going to be on the agenda. I think it's okay, because no matter what, public comment is encouraged, and I am, still part of the public. I am here to serve District 1, and I will represent the interests and needs of District 1 and Orange County at large. But I'm allowed to also make my public comments known. So I will see you there.
Awesome. There were some awesome meetings this past week. You were able to meet with our friends from the ASPCA and the Humane Society again to talk about kind of an overview of what happened at the BCC.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a few times. There's an ordinance that I feel very strongly needs to be enacted in Orange County to protect not just pets and puppies and kittens and hopefully we can include rabbits. We want to make sure that we're being as protective as possible, but the ordinance is also geared really to protect consumers, to protect existing ethical businesses. And the ordinance is, sort of simply stated, a retail pet store ban for people who understand what happens in puppy mills and about the industry that is, puppy mill in their sales. They utilize retail outlets oftentimes to move what are sick, hurt, and mistreated puppies. And they are imported sometimes like, any other piece of cargo, which is just a horrible, horrible thought after coming out of a puppy mill that's somewhere else in the country where oversight isn't possible. And I think for people who are like, well, why wouldn't we just come down on the puppy mill? Well, that's not in our jurisdiction. If we had a puppy mill here in Orange County, we would. Absolutely. If there was, in fact, we found out this week, anytime that there are concerns about the mistreatment of animals, Orange County does absolutely intervene. And the issue is that what we are is we end up being the end of a supply line of this illegal operation somewhere else in the country. So the hope, what research has actually shown, so it's more than a hope, it's actually data driven, is that when there is a stop to the retail outlet, to that end source, of the supply and demand chain, that it can affect and really dampen the operations of the illegal puppy mills. And so that's what we're making a move for, and we're just trying to get as much information in as possible and listen to as many people out there that have really been on the front lines of trying to save these animals and trying to make sure that we are addressing animal cruelty anywhere that it comes up, anywhere that we can.
Yeah, I never knew that this was as large of an industry, as organized of an industry, that there's so much room for corruption and for even predatory financing issues.
Yes.
And it's been a huge learning experience. And I thought I was like an environmental advocate my whole life. I never knew that this problem was as widespread throughout the country.
Yeah, well, what happens is there's areas of the country that are still very, very rural that have lots of room in wide open areas where that if somebody wants to do set up a puppy mill and do really horrible breeding practices that are dangerous and inhumane, that there's just not any oversight to that. The USDA is supposed to be the regulating body from the federal government, but quite frankly they are grossly understaffed, and they are the oversight for all agricultural production.
Yeah.
So you're looking at a very diluted regulatory system for what should be, I think, a little more tailor-made to protect our loved ones, which are our pets. If you look at the way that we feel about our dogs and our cats and our rabbits and our, they're family members. And I think what happens is when we talk to people about these issues, I think there's a natural tendency to be concerned that we're limiting the ability of members of the public from getting their pet from a reputable breeder, or from being able to go on Pet Finder and see what's up for adoption. Those things will not be affected by this ordinance.
Yeah.
It is very specifically retail pet stores And the ones here in Orange County have been the subject, at least the ones that, sort of prompted us into looking at solutions, have already been the subject of statewide investigations for their practices, some consumer issues, some bad consumer practices, and then in addition to it, the just inhumane and health issues that come up. We were able to go this week actually and meet with our animal services division and go through Orange County's animal shelter, where there is sadly an intake of animals that are either stray, abandoned. Oftentimes there are animals that are relinquished to them or have ended up there for any number of reasons. And we spoke very candidly with the staff there about what they thought of this ordinance. And a vet that was there that day, actually doing spaying and neutering, said that she is now fostering a deaf dog with some pretty severe congenital disorders that was a pet store reject, that somebody purchased this animal for, I don't know, upwards of $1,000, $1,200. And the animal, when it started having health problems, the person who purchased it, the consumer, took the animal back and said something's wrong with this animal. And sadly, the pet store, instead of really trying to do the right thing, said, we'll just give you a different one. We'll just switch it out like it was a pair of jeans. And my heart is, broken for that family, because I'm sure there are people in that family that really loved and wanted to, keep and care for that animal. But, what a challenge to think of a dog that had all these congenital conditions and that they, went into debt to be able to bring home. So that dog ended up at the shelter, which means that your tax dollars, my tax dollars, which I'm fine with, but they're going towards caring for this dog that now somebody has profited off of, that is suffering. And, luckily, because we have a lot of people with a big heart in this community, that dog is fostering with a vet because she can care for that dog. And what a beautiful thing, right? That this dog ended up with somebody who could love her and treat her. But that's not happening in every case.
Yeah, it's something particularly special about this case with the dog being deaf. Because there's no veterinary record from where this dog came from, how it was treated, they missed a very important opportunity to train the puppy correctly to be able to understand how to work with people so that it doesn't run into the road being deaf. What they did instead was just treat it like a product and get this dog purchased, and then when they brought it back, instead of having some quality control, making sure that figuring out what's wrong with the dog, they just gave the person a new dog and ended up putting the dog into the shelter. And it's really disheartening, because that dog's life could be permanently altered from now on, not being able to properly understand or communicate, Well,
like I said, I think this was actually, of all the bad things that could have happened, for that dog to have ended up somewhere that the foster parent is somebody with some expertise. It's unusual and very fortunate. And how many of those stories are happening that's not the case? And that's the part that makes you, really makes you really sad. And I think, it came up at the last commission meeting. There were questions about whether do we know if the retail pets that are being sold in those storefronts that are coming from puppy mills, do we know how many of them end up in the shelter? And there's no way to know that, because as it turns out, when you take a dog in off the street, a stray, or somebody who has just relinquished, a dog that they don't even know the full story on, you don't get that record. You don't get their origin story. There's a little deaf puppy can't tell you, yes, I was born in Missouri, and then they put me in a box and shipped me down here. And so you're not going to get that whole story. But as a community, we have an obligation to try to figure out ways within our statutory guidelines as a county, which we're a charter county, that can look for ways to keep our citizens safe and healthy and provide for the welfare of all the residents here. It falls within those guidelines. So we, I think, are in a really good position to try to make sure that that happens.
Yeah. So May 11th will be when this comes up for a discussion again at the BCC. So if you have any questions, please email district1@ocfl.net. If you want to submit a public comment, we can educate you on how the steps to take to do that.
Yeah, even though we're not fully open in our BCC chambers right now, and I think we're they're gradually rolling in, more openings and expanding capacity as the vaccine numbers go up. But you can still public comment on anything at any time. And I think it's a really important thing to remember. If you know that it's on the agenda, if it's going to be on the agenda, if it's been on the agenda, if it's something that came up in a work session, but you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd known, I want to say something, you can say it on the next one. Because if it was in a work session part of the agenda, it means that it hasn't come back for a vote yet, but it probably will.
Yeah.
And so you can still go on the record. Like I think I said about the library having public comment. The great thing about public comment is, and I know people, it's not comfortable, but you can make it as short and sweet as you want to. If you want to go on and just say, I support the ordinance that will protect the pets of this county. I will support the ordinance that will make sure that, animal cruelty is, continuing to be watched. However you want to word it, in whatever words, however short and sweet, because all of that matters.
And anyone with a soul who doesn't have private interests will listen.
Yes.
Hopefully. So let's talk a little bit about your experience this week with interacting with the community, because you actually were able to go to a Zoom meeting. I know the people of District 1. Oh my goodness, amazing individuals that make their way to this office. You had a Zoom meeting with Hunters Creek.
Yes.
You had a community meet and greet with Williamsburg, and we'll talk about some other partners that you went with. But how were those experiences?
Yes, and for geographical explanations, if you look at District 1, it's really very large geographically, and so the southern points of District 1, Hunters Creek, and then Williamsburg, I don't get to see as often geographically because it's not on my way here downtown, but both those areas, both those communities are so amazing. And I feel so grateful to the residents there for their engagement, for their commitment to their community. I love talking to them. And it's one of those things that when on the frustrating days dealing with things, I think about how engaged they are, and it makes me it resets my focus, my priorities. Hunters Creek, if you know where it is in location, geographically to downtown Orlando and to the east and west part of town, it is really at a crossroads. And I mean that in the way that, the 417 is right there, and there's so much growth around them.
Yeah.
And their concerns are, really about how to make sure that the things that they have preserved and that they are, that they prioritize aren't just trampled over when other, kind of growing interests compete. And so we've heard, that there's obviously a transportation corridor in that area that Brightline is going through the process of federal approvals for. And I will continue to impress upon the people of Brightline to engage Hunters Creek, that this is a great community. They want to talk. They want to be a part of this conversation. They're very concerned with the noise that could bring, and they want to make sure that whoever's in charge of that the locations and the structure understands the residential nature and who's going to be affected. So, that dialogue is just really important to them. They also have, like many other areas in Orange County, a golf course that is no longer in business, that was purchased by a private developer, and they are very, very engaged in trying to make sure that the use of that golf course falls in line with what the use is that their community needs, because it is literally in the center, it is the heart of their community. And they want that green space, they want that open space, and they are very, very concerned that someone is going to try to just make the most money flipping it over for something that isn't compatible with what their beautiful community is really all about. So, and if you know anything about Hunters Creek, some of the cool parts of their history, they made a decision as a community to invest in making sure that their retention ponds, the ponds that you see throughout developments that really just kind of take the runoff rainwater, storm water, that they utilize those for the best environmental purpose they could. They repurpose them with natural Florida landscaping and with things that can absorb runoff. So they end up actually doing some of the water treatment right there naturally. And that was an investment they personally decided to make as homeowners. So if it tells you anything about their heart and where they are and how much they love their community and what they're willing to put in, because I think so much of the issue in places that are struggling is that there's either leadership or other influences that don't think the residents care or are paying attention. And the news flash is, yes, they are. They care and they're paying attention. And at Hunters Creek, there's just so many examples of that in the way that they run their they have like a master HOA, and seeing all the faces on the call and being able to put names and faces and hear their concerns firsthand will be the first of many of these conversations in helping them.
Yeah, seeing a community be so engaged and care about the environment and care about their community with like embracing arms for each other and for their neighborhood, it brings me hope.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so another group of people who are in the same exact situation where they're very good at communicating with each other and reaching out to this office, you went and had a meet and greet with Williamsburg.
Yes, and actually it is a little older. It has more like a little more historic background as far as when Williamsburg was really one of the first residential areas that encompass sort of the tourists, the south side of the tourist corridor. So if you look at the I-Drive corridor, Williamsburg falls right in between there and has really been an area of young families and older couples who've been empty nesters and people who have recently come to Central Florida from all over the world. So I love that community. It is so diverse and engaged. I loved that, understanding how crazy my schedule is. I actually had to reschedule one of my meetings with them already, and that they were kind and patient and welcoming, and they made some space so that we could be socially distanced and still meet in person, which was just such a great experience. And I wish I had a list of things that were already done for them that they engaged with the county on in the past. I didn't. I really feel like there are so many instances where they've asked and asked and asked, and they've asked the right way, and it's been things that their tax dollars should be used to work on. We're talking about infrastructure that is just aging. We're talking about safety, pedestrian safety, roadway safety. These aren't their asks are not out of the realm of things that we do every single day. So I don't know why there was a delay, but it is my mission to get those things done as quickly and efficiently as possible, with an apology for it not being done so far. There are some challenges they have that I'm not sure, we're going to have to dig further. They have noise from helicopters that are used potentially for entertainment purposes, and we're just not sure exactly what angles to take to try to resolve that, but we're going to work on it. And anything that we don't know, we'll keep asking questions. Hopefully if you're tuned in and we discuss one of these issues and you think, actually I know how to help with that, please
let us know.
That's right. This is absolutely a community forum, and we are open to all problem solving and ideas that you got. So please stay engaged if you can pipe in on any of those things. And, and yes, Williamsburg, thank you for welcoming us. And I am excited to have, this was one of many. We're going to set up, quarterly meetings with them, because I do feel like they've been, to some extent, not heard as much as they really needed to be.
Yeah, and just letting you all know, because we get a lot of emails from all over the county, not just the district, on street racing.
Yeah.
We're going to have a meeting with the sheriff's department. We're going to hear updates, and we're going to let you know, because I know that's everywhere. I know I hear them. Do you hear them by you?
Yes, it's everywhere. But this is going to lead me to something that I've been trying to explain, and I think it's a we are used to in Florida roads that look a certain way because we do have flat, open spaces. And so Orange County, for many, many years, their mode of expansion has been to add a lane, get wider, get faster, add a lane, get wider, get faster. We are literally providing the racing strips for these.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at the research in other areas, other cities, about how they keep pedestrians safe, bicyclists safe, and other motorists safe, what they do is they have to literally think of creative ways to slow traffic down in residential areas or areas of concern. And adding lanes isn't helping. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
And so I know that's a hard thing to wrap our brains around as far as like trying to make sure that our commute time is what it's supposed to be. Well, I can tell you what's going to mess up your commute time is an accident.
Oh my
goodness. So
goodness.
what we need to do is just keep people safe and understand part of that is, and especially where there are school crossings and where we have bike lanes, we need physical barriers for the bike lanes. A paint strip doesn't work. And we need to slow traffic down visually. There's something that happens in people's heads, even if they're in a residential area and the speed limit says 45, that if it looks like a highway, they're going to get faster. And so we're seeing it, we're seeing the result of that type of roadway planning, and we're just going to have to do it different. And anytime that we have an opportunity, and if you tuned into the last BCC meeting, there was a discussion about the redevelopment of a roadway, and it was my first question was, well, what are we, this is all residential, this road goes past 2 schools, what are we doing to slow it down? It sounds like you're adding lanes.
Yeah.
What are we doing to slow it down? Because if you add lanes, they're gonna speed up.
Yeah.
So whether that's coming up with, they say that some, landscape design can help, that there are ways that, having visual, and then also doing the roundabouts, which we've talked about before, that a roundabout as an intersection, not only is it more resilient during a storm, but it also requires you to slow down without doing that stacking at intersections that people do, and they take off and then they stack.
Yep.
So,
I mean, when I first moved here about 15 years ago, Orlando was the 3rd most dangerous city for pedestrians. Now we're number 1.
Yeah.
And that's not something we should be proud of. There should be an active effort to try to make things
and I know
safer.
that for the street racing, enforcement is part of it, and I know for speeding, enforcement's going to be part of it. And if anybody who breaks the law and then hits a pedestrian, by no means am I saying that has to be a part of it. But the other part of it, and especially a part that we need to look at in local government because it falls in our responsibilities, is really that planning. And how are we planning? We need to make sure that residential areas aren't cut-throughs for major, thoroughfares where those people that are cutting through don't live there, don't work there. They're just using it to get from A to B.
Yeah.
So they don't care how fast they're going to be going from A to B because they just want to get through there. They're not looking around for the kids that are on bikes.
Yeah.
So that's a planning issue, and everything that comes across, my desk, anything that comes through this office, we're going to really scrutinize, considering those people and considering the walkers, the bikers, and also the sustainability of it. What would happen should the power go out? Can we continue to cross traffic in high winds?
Yeah. One other meeting that you went out to in the community this week that you actually got a lot of traction on social media, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. The Ocoee Commission meeting.
Yeah, I just went as an observer this go around. I think we talked about it a little bit last week if you tuned in. If not, that's okay.
After your tour with Matthew's Hope.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you live, well, actually, this isn't just a District 1 thing, but District 1 has very recently been more impacted by, we have homeless residents that were oftentimes there but not visible because they were we had more rural areas, more woods, and that provided cover and it provided to some extent some shelter. So we had, a lot of times there were families, and sometimes multiple families, and sometimes those areas grow, that were in woods and had been trespassed, which means that they were told they had to leave the woods, literally pushed out of those woods because a property owner in their legal right needed that property for another use, or they were told by the city that they could no longer allow those people to stay there. So in this particular case, there are some of these areas that fall into the city of Ocoee's jurisdiction, and the county really has some additional resources and has some additional family and individual services that we wanted to try to help trigger to wrap around some of the things that are being offered out there by our nonprofit partners, by Matthew's Hope as an outreach. They do all these services, and if we can try to help and we can try to bring the decision makers to the table to try to prevent any suffering, anybody from being in a position of danger, then we wanted to try to do that. And we were unable to bring Ocoee into that conversation as a municipality, even though we tried. So there were people who went to the Ocoee meeting from nonprofit partners, from the county. Our actually homeless and mental health services coordinator presented to the Ocoee City Commission, and really the ask is just work with us. Work with us. If we know, if you know that there are notices going out from the Ocoee, well, I guess it is their
Code enforcement.
Their code enforcement, then if you know those notices are going out and you can notify us, we will help try to provide some wraparound services. If we aren't noticed of that, if we don't get notification, no one just picks up a phone and gives us a call, shoots me a text, then unfortunately we're on the back end trying to figure out how to help these people that are now behind somebody's house sleeping, or a business. And so, chasing them off of one piece of property and into a different municipality may help your municipality for a day or two, but ultimately isn't helping these individuals, and it certainly isn't helping our community as a whole. So my approach has really, I've really tried to think holistically and how we can help the area, because I know it isn't just, one municipality. It isn't just one neighborhood. So what we need to do is really figure out some long-term strategies. But in the short term, if there's, a notice going out to a homeless camp, then, give us a heads up. If you're listening, we will help.
Pastor Scott did bring up, you can't arrest away homelessness.
Can't arrest it away.
And I really love that quote. I think there's a lot of awareness, though, that residents really need to educate themselves on, and we can help bring those informational pieces to you. One major thing is that you can't necessarily help everyone. There are some people who do not like to live in today's social structure, but the resources that Commissioner Wilson's talking about are resources to help get into the camps, physically on the front lines, and help find people who want to integrate, who want those rehabilitation wraparound services. And it's going to be a process that's slower than a trespass. It's going to be something that is going to take some time and a network of organizations to come together and work on.
Exactly. And I think even for the individuals who don't want to be don't want to be entered into a system that may put them on a wait list for some residential options, that we can still try to help with some basic needs and maybe some opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think that without coming to the table and discussing it, though, we don't have any chance at all. And that's the part that was hard for me to understand. And I think, it was really encouraging to see the citizens of Ocoee who came to the meeting and really expressed their concern. There's a lot of heart there, and there's a lot of compassion there. And I think when we hear about some of the things that are happening with the trespassing and with pushing people out of this property and onto that property, I don't want to do the blame game, because I think that if you have a piece of property and its use is to sell it to somebody else, or it is or you're being fined by the city in some of these cases, because the city says that you can't have people sleeping there, then you're not at fault. And we would never, ever try to point the finger that way. We just really want to try to help find solutions. And sometimes they're not obvious, but sometimes we just have to sit down and like go over what's out there, what we know about, what you know about, and try to get to some of those answers. So, thank you for your patience with me as I get educated on what resources are available and how to partner with other municipalities, with the state, with the federal government. And we're continuing to look at those. There's going to be more grant opportunities coming. And I really believe that District 1 is in a good position to try to offer not just, a short-term fix, but really try to find ways to make sure that we are empowering people to really take control of their situations in whatever way they want to in order to be completely self-sufficient. Because that's the ultimate goal. Government doesn't have the answer. Some of these wonderful nonprofits don't have all the answers. They can maybe help get people positioned for self-sufficiency, and that's got to be our goal.
Yeah. An article came out this morning from NPR, and maybe Ann can drop it in the chat if she can find it, about how there's 600,000 people in Central Florida that are food insecure right now, and that homelessness is really, really, really high. And we're talking even the individuals that are living in motels. Even when we went to the animal shelter, we saw a huge increase of animals that were given because there were evictions or people had to consolidate.
They couldn't afford food for their family, nonetheless their dogs. And this is much heartbreaking thing that this dog or cat isn't there because they weren't loved. They were there because there were no longer resources. And so, these aren't just numbers, these are humans. And these are, I think we are on the precipice of, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Pastor Scott, described some of his concerns several months ago, and we're seeing exactly what he described come to fruition. And I think that understanding how important getting the resources coming into the right places at the right times, it's going to be critical. So please stay engaged with us on this. And I think, like I said, I think the community, people who've reached out to me have such a great heart, and they feel, and I mean from all over the county, have a great heart, and they really want to make sure that we are paying attention and that we are engaged and that we're doing everything we can. And I promise you we are. It has taken up, it has taken up the biggest chunk, I think, of our sort of, manpower this week in our, efforts to get the resources we have in the county, the city, and trying to find out what's going on at the state and federal level. And we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah. Just last point on this, Matthew's Hope, we posted a list of items that they're looking for donations. They spend $20,000 just clearing, sorting, and throwing away donations from people of broken items and things that they don't need. They have a specific list, and we can drop their website on the comments of things that people need, like socks and sneakers and XYZ. So
running shoes.
For
my running friends, if you are somebody that if you're like me, sometimes you'll get a new pair of running shoes, only wear them once, but realize that I can't return them now because that was a run, but they are like barely touched, but they're just not the right fit.
Yep.
That's perfect, because they described that the nurse practitioner that was there described that they dry really fast, so you don't get the fungal infections and the water, the retention that you can get sometimes in the elements with other types of shoes. So I know I've got some running buddies out there that probably didn't think about it that way, but it's a really great use of lightly used running shoes.
Yep. So donate items or money or your time.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and I think Matthew's Hope and Pastor Scott he understands that not everybody's going to line up with his philosophy and the way that his methodology is. So if that is not where you want to pitch in, there are other nonprofit partners. There are a lot of things that are directed purely for children and women and children. We have some,
Coalition
very
for the
specific,
Homeless.
very specific needs.
Shepherd's Hope.
Yep. So there's some very specific needs, for some specific type of population that may speak more to you as somebody who wants to help. And so I just encourage you to partner up with them.
Yes, and now in closing, you brought up some really interesting legislative things happening in Tallahassee right now that I don't know anything about. So I'm very excited to learn what you bring into the discussion today.
Yes, so it's been very frustrating. I'm going to try to keep my cool about it because I think it's really this year, our voter turnout was really, really high, right? So we put all these people in office, and we are all really hopeful that when we put these people in office all over the place, that they're representing us. And I want you to look up the work of your representatives at Tallahassee. Who did you send to the State House? Who is your representative in Tallahassee? What are they working on? There are some bills right now that are being moved along, and there are some that are sitting on the governor's desk waiting to be signed into law that are absolutely horrible. And I mean that in like the most
Scary.
I watch this every year. I'm a little bit of a geek. I like to watch the legislative stuff coming through. And every year I'm like, well, that was a dumb one, but that might be a good one. Oh, that might be a good one. Ooh, that one's going to get struck down by the courts. Well, this year, my head wants to explode because I don't even know what is in the water up there. But just to give you a couple of the ones that have sort of raised my attention and have been part of discussions with other, folks in the community. We're talking right now about homelessness and about our issues, making sure that people have housing that they can afford. It is not rocket science to find out what our median incomes are, what our lower incomes are, what our higher ends, and then making sure that the housing that we have on the inventory matches that, right? So if we know that affordable housing has to match a certain income, that's just the facts. That doesn't have to be an opinion. That's just the facts. In Florida, we have a fund. It's a trust fund that is established really for affordable housing. And the legislature once again decided to take a swipe at it. When I say take a swipe at it, what I mean is they went in and decided to use the funds that are set aside for the trust funds that were set aside by statute for affordable housing and use them for environmental projects. And don't get me wrong, I feel really strongly the environmental projects have to be funded.
Yeah.
I just think to steal from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to pay for our pollution cleanup is a slap in the face of the people in this state that pay taxes, who work hard every day, hoping that the people they hire in Tallahassee are making good decisions for them. Right now, the Florida legislature, they passed a measure. It's waiting to be signed in. It permanently reallocates funds from the state's affordable housing program to pay for the governor's environmental initiatives. Some of those are initiatives that should have probably been triggered years ago when Rick Scott was pretending that we didn't have sea level rise. So yeah, it's going to be doing things that really were late on anyway.
Yeah. Is this in lieu of like holding corporations accountable?
Oh, that's a whole different story. Wait, that's a whole different story.
Shouldn't they be paying for pollution
cleanup? Do you know how much? Hang on, did I put it down here? I don't know if I printed it. I'm not sure if I printed this.
Okay.
I got to find the number. As it turns out, the cleanup for that private mining business that is now
wreaking havoc
in the Tampa Bay area. And don't get me wrong, their solution, they keep saying, looks like we dodged a bullet. They dodged a bullet that a tidal wave of pollutants didn't go down a street. It's now going into Tampa Bay. They didn't dodge a bullet. They're just dispersing the poison. So really, there was no good answer there other than we should never have permitted that project to start out with. And when we did permit it, the scrutiny should have been higher, and there should have been money put away right then and there from that private entity. And you talk about welfare and giveaways.
Yeah.
Why we let polluters off the hook and pay for their cleanup every time, that is corporate welfare.
Yeah.
Every time. And it should infuriate you as taxpayers.
Yeah.
I see things sometimes where I feel like taxpayers get very frustrated with things like the SNAP program, where we're feeding people baby formula, I'm like, how would that make you mad? But giving $100 million to clean up Lake Apopka after corporate polluters killed it is okay with you. So I think we just have to look at what that, look at what that really means. And let's look at that, if we are really undone with the idea of welfare or welfare state, right? This idea of where are we going to, as taxpayers, fill in the gaps? My suggestion is we don't do it to help the polluters.
Yeah.
That we do it when there's a baby involved. That we do it when there's a family in crisis. That we do it when we understand that right now people have been displaced or laid off because of COVID, that this is a good time to use that safety net. That when we know that somebody is making millions of dollars making fertilizer and putting their pollutants in a big tub, a big pool, to then dump out into your backyard later, that's not where we want to offer corporate welfare. That's not
for you to pay to clean it up out of your tax dollars.
Right. That's right. So I know that when I was running for election, that there was a mailer that went out that they called it radical, that I brought this up. I'm going to keep bringing it up because I don't think it's radical. I think you having clean water is a right. I think that you asking polluters to clean up is a right. And I'm going to keep saying it and saying it and saying it. And I hope that the people who voted in, the people in Tallahassee that are deciding that that's your problem to clean up, I hope you fire them. Mm-hmm. You should fire them.
Yeah. And, I think that, I think this, for me, I know, is very intimidating information. I feel like you being so vocal and transparent and explaining it and breaking it down is something that I wish everybody set the standard for all elected officials to do this for their constituents.
Well, and I feel like sometimes that I'm not giving it the right amount of explanation. So if there's ever an issue that we're bringing up here that you want to talk about more, we will. Because I do think sometimes when you read the bill, they're titled, the title sometimes is misleading. You start reading the language and then you understand a little better, but the process isn't always clear. And so we can talk about that. I don't mind calling one of our local representatives to come sit on the couch here and maybe help us. We have some that are friends, that are friendly, that would be, I think, very willing, that are very transparent. So maybe we'll try to maybe do that sometime in the future if there are some issues that pique your curiosity. I want to hit on a couple more of these. Yeah. And I know we're over time.
I'm reading some right now, and I'm like, I don't quite understand how dangerous that could potentially be.
Yeah. Well, so the preemption. Are you talking about the? So my family gets like, oh gosh, here she goes again about preemption. So the preemption issue, again, if I can just go ahead and go over it just a little bit, because I know that it is misunderstood sometimes, is there are, an order in which the importance of laws take over, right?
Yes.
So you think of the Constitution of the United States of America as being the highest piece of law in our land, and that's correct. Then you think our state constitution is the second for us. And then you come on down the line and we've got our local charter. We have our own mini constitution here in Orange County. I've taken an oath to all of those, right? I take an oath, to the Constitution as an attorney and as a elected official. When there are preemptions at the federal level and traditionally at the state level, it's been because the item was something that really was more under the purview of the state or federal constitution. And for instance, the federal government does foreign policy, right? Nicole Wilson, commissioner for District 1, has no business figuring out what's going on in the Suez Canal for the people of our country. That's the federal government, right? So they preempt that. That makes 100% sense.
Yeah.
They also, the federal government, the state government, can preempt guidelines or federal protections or state protections. The amount of lead that you're allowed to have in, your water, in the paint. There's a guideline. Typically, that's set as a floor.
Yeah.
The state or the local government historically could build upon that and could be the ceiling, if you will. Could say, we want more protection here. This Orange County is a little different. We're worried about this because of some historic relevance. We want to add to that. And that's always been a very traditional way the preemption provided the floor, and then the local government could add to it. What we're seeing now at an unbelievable level of takeover is preemptions of everything to strip local government of its home rule power. And when I tell you that America was founded on the idea of local control, like we literally were like, England, go away. We got this. You can't tell us what to do because you're far away. The idea of local control is still very relevant. We understand here in Orange County some of the really important things about Orange County's citizens, the health and welfare of our citizens, and Tallahassee lawmakers again and again and again have stripped that power. And the latest and greatest is that they have a bill that will preempt local emergency orders. So let's say that we do have a pollution incident, that there is something that we know is happening locally, and that the mayor and the commissioners are like, oh my gosh, we need to get an emergency order out ASAP because there is a literal local issue. Tallahassee lawmakers have now decided that that isn't going to be valid unless they say it's valid.
So if, let's say, there's pollutants that are killing manatees and we want to make sure that everyone within the vicinity knows that this is a crisis or something along the lines there.
We have to move quick, right? So some of these things require this kind of movement. Emergency orders are exactly that. They are triggered because of an emergency. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of being told, no, this all is going to run through Tallahassee, is stripping what is really a fundamental constitutional job of local government, which is protecting the health, safety, and welfare of its residents. So, you know, I hope that there are groups, citizen groups out there and potentially local governments that challenge this, because to me, taking away the ability to declare an emergency, I think, there's, you can play out examples of how this would be catastrophic in so many ways, but, imagine a tornado. Imagine, the idea of not being able to issue an emergency order in Orange County for Orange County residents should terrify you. Call Tallahassee, call your governor, call your lawmakers, please get engaged, because at this point, if they take that, then I don't even know how we move forward if there's an emergency.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones that you brought up here.
Making it harder to get citizens initiatives on the ballot.
Yeah.
Restricting ways that we're voting.
So let me understand that fully. So what about some of the other issues that you've brought up in the past?
So some of the bills that are right now, the other ones that, that are making me a little bit crazy. So, this year, obviously, with trying to make sure we can get our democracy moving, even in a pandemic, which we did in a very effective and safe manner. There are lawmakers who didn't like the accessibility and availability of that safe and secure election process. And so they want to restrict the availability of the drop boxes, the very safe and secure drop boxes that we had in early voting locations. They want to restrict the way that you can get your absentee ballot, which, by the way, will affect everyone from our service members to people who are hospitalized. It's the most undemocratic thing in the world to restrict voting. I don't understand it. If you love your Constitution and you consider yourself a patriot, then you should protect voters' rights. This should be the number one thing that you protect. If you believe in our Constitution and you consider yourself an American, and you love that Second Amendment, my God, please give the First Amendment some of its own importance, because I think we hear all the time about the Second Amendment, and then we can't talk about gun safety because of the Second Amendment, but the First Amendment is getting eroded left and right. When I say that, what I mean is that if citizens can't put initiatives on a ballot, which is what they're trying to restrict, if we can't as citizens put initiatives, that's a First Amendment violation. And so I think it's there's this disconnect a little bit, because there's lobbying interests that make sure that the Second Amendment gets as much attention as it gets, that ignore the other really important things that are being robbed of our Bill of Rights right under your nose. Your ability to submit your ballot, your ability as a citizen to bring forward constitutional amendments or other ballot measures. Those are critical to your First Amendment rights.
Yeah. Well, just to check in, do we have any questions that have come in so far?
You have a lot of questions.
Oh, goodness.
A lot of comments. Too many comments to go through.
Okay.
But we have a couple questions that I can give you. So Brian Johnson says, thank you for helping to keep the library moving along. It is so needed. It will be a vital part of the community. Aside from the meetings, are there any other ways to help it keep it moving? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, the library and Horizon West will just keep the dialogue up, including attending the meeting, giving comments, emailing the Orange County Library System Board of Trustees, Director and CFO. Feel free to reach out to any other, I mean, obviously I kind of know what's going on here, but any other leaders at the city level. So the city of Orlando is involved in this because they co-own the property that was identified, located, and, agreed upon to be used in the Horizon West, for the Horizon West branch. So feel free to reach out to any of those individuals, and continuing to really also talk it up in your community, right? So if you are at a neighborhood event, or if you have some friends that you can push out things to, even on social media, that's all helpful. And we will just keep getting that information out. Like I said, the library board is committed. They've been fabulous about communicating with me. But this is a voluntary position for them. And so they are really just trying to do the right thing, and they are being inundated, I think, with interests that are, not conflicting with Horizon West, but maybe in competition. And that is why I want to make sure I'm keeping that dialogue up, and that they don't feel like their vote is going to be set aside, because it shouldn't be. They have the power as that board of trustees to make that decision, and to know that as a community that we're supporting them.
Yep.
Okay. Dave Waring says, any way that I can piggyback off of the library momentum to get that roller hockey rink built?
Oh, the roller hockey rink. We've already connected via email. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other things under construction right now with the parks.
Yeah, and I want you to know that we have expressed to the Parks and Recreation Department and anybody else that would listen to us, the interest, and we will continue to communicate that. I know you all know this, and I appreciate you bringing it to our attention and making sure that we know the interest out there, because I do think it's something that would be really amazing for our community. But there, you're dealing with this pot of revenue, and then so many needs that we want. So we're trying really hard to make sure we're communicating all of them, and then making sure we're getting the momentum needed for the ones that we can get right away, and then what we can put sort of in the timeline of the future.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Sharon Breed Bailey says, is there anything we can do about trash along our roadsides?
Yes. Please send us a location, because we were going to do a trash cleanup.
Yeah.
And we checked in with a bunch of partners, and we couldn't find a location. So I
we're
would
going
love,
your way.
Yes, please send us. That is great news, because
Yeah.
we've been trying to organize that with our nonprofit partner Ideas for Us, and we couldn't find a location.
Yeah.
So email us the location at district1@ocfl.net.
Exactly. And then also, once we have those locations, we can try to make sure that if there's something going on, like, along that stretch with our waste management that needs to be addressed long term, that we can take a look at that too.
Yeah, I reached out to EPD, and they have an amazing volunteer coordinator who has already met with us, and we have some things coming down the line.
Frank Del Guercio says, so there's a future community Orange County Park that is slated for the corner of Wood, Sage, and Porter and Summer Lake. It is a blank slate vacant lot. Any chance that this will get developed, finished before the regional park? It is much smaller and already planned. Would be a great place to plant some new trees.
Yeah, well, I've seen that come up. I've seen it go through the approval process, so I know that it's there. but we will definitely follow up and make sure that I maybe find out what the timeline is. I know the regional park is a bigger project and there's going to be phases to it, but I agree. If we can find some place to get some of those trees in sooner rather than later, because we know that every year that goes by, if we get them planted the right way, we're getting our own tree coverage back, which is a huge target goal for us. So
yeah, shout out to Matt Sudemeyer with the Parks Department. We are currently doing, and we'll post about this, but we just solidified today an Arbor Day tree planting at Independence Park, and we're in a conversation with him about doing a tree planting at the Dr. Phillips Park. So just put that one over to us.
And I was gonna say we'll push forward with that. I love it. I love that.
Love it.
Yes, thank you.
You have a lot of comments, but the only actual question that I see is from Todd A. Jamieson. Asked, could we get land for some tiny homes?
Oh my gosh, I love this. This is why I love my community, though, because I love that idea. I think it's one of many, many, many really great thoughts and ideas that we need to bring to the table when so part of the conversation that we started having surrounding transitional housing shortage is if we have some land surplus, if there is some available lands for us to be able to utilize, what is going to be the best use of that land. And to your point, I don't necessarily know if shelter, a short-term shelter is the right or appropriate use.
Yeah.
I love the model tiny home community, and what I think it does provide a sense of community. I think the footprint environmentally is perfect as far as what we're able to do in providing housing without the impact. And I think it's also falls into a more affordable range. So I love that idea, and we'll definitely put that on the list of things to research and bring back to the table when we look at what we're going to do, because within the next 4 years, my goal is to really hone in on a couple places where we can have housing options that we haven't had historically.
Yes, I heard on NPR today that the American Relief Package is set to have $5 billion for affordable housing, separate from a fund that they're going to basically carve out for addressing the homelessness issues and giving nonprofits and shelters capacity funding. We're talking $5 billion for local governments to have support to develop affordable housing.
Yeah, because I do think, we talked about this, and I think that to your point, sheltering is yes, we need to keep people safe. I understand the importance for that. But long-term solutions will need to include ideas for affordable housing that are a good fit for a community.
Yeah.
And I love looking at the tiny home villages, and how, to me, that type of planning can be so creative.
Yeah.
And so I love that you've kind of opened that as another way for us to consider taking care of a real need in District 1.
Yeah, and thank you all so much for asking questions and putting comments. We'll read all of them and try to answer them as we go. Do you have any comments for people to salute them for the weekend? Have
a great weekend. And listen, I want to tell you all also, I know this all comes across on social media, and I haven't read these comments yet. I know every now and then people pipe in with negativity. I'm okay. I love you all. I love that I have friends that will pipe in, and it's okay. I am a big First Amendment believer, and I'm a big girl. I can take the hits, and sometimes, every now and then, one of those negative Nellies out there comes around. So I don't want to delete them. I'm not part of the cancel culture. I don't mind, as long as we can keep it civil, and I don't mind a debate. I actually really love a debate. So as long as we have a good civil discourse, I love having different ideas and bringing them to the table. And thank you for tuning in and staying with me and helping us really get so much of this stuff done.
Yeah, and thank you all so much for being amazing citizens that are interacting with local government. I wish I could make more people every day care, and we just thank you. Yeah, we do, and you do, and
you all
thank
do.
you.
Yes.
And so it's still before the state.
Oh, go for Tortoise Day on Saturday.
Oh, go for Tortoise Day on Saturday.
That's
Don't
right.
forget.
Go for Tortoise Day on Saturday. I'm sorry, Kim, if you're listening.
Kim, we
and
love you.
Valerie, and yes, go for Tortoise Day, Split Oak Park.
We did make posts about it.
Okay, it's a great event. We love our Go for Tortoises.
All right. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.